whether you're thinking about adopting from foster care or you already have, you have probably heard some horror stories about difficult behaviors you may encounter with an adopted or foster child. And actually in my last video, I shared some of the mild, moderate, and severe behavioral challenges you may see in your adopted or foster child. But don't worry, I'm not just gonna leave you with all of the doom and gloom and not give you any ideas. So today's video is all about ways to help you cope with and even prevent some of these really challenging behaviors that you may see in your children. Hi there, if you're new here, my name is Katie and I'm a foster adoptive mom of 3 kids ages 4 through 12. And here on my YouTube channel, I share my own personal experience with adopting from foster care, and I also provide many tips and tricks for parents who want to do the same. If any of that sounds interesting to you, definitely subscribe because I make a ton of adoption videos and you can look at my channel and find lots of other topics that you may be interested in as well. And for those of you that have been around for a while, you may be thinking, Katie, where are you? I'm actually, strangely, in Washington, D.C. right now. Very last minute trip, so that is why my background is very different than usual, and the lighting is so good, which is brought to you by the window with the amazing view that you are currently placed in front of. So I'll have to include a little clip of that here. That's enough rambling. Let's get into today's topic. So this first tip is an extremely practical one and one that I think we often overlook, and that is all about the environment you live in. One way that you can help mitigate some of these behavioral issues is by providing an environment that is calm, safe, and not overwhelming. So what does that look like? Well, on a really practical level, this may sound silly to you, but if you have a lot of stuff, if you have an overly cluttered home, this can actually really contribute not only to your child's stress levels, but also yours. And as we know as parents, if you are stressed, it does affect your children. And so therefore, it's very important that you keep this area of your life under control. And something that I love about this tip is that it is something that you have control over. There's so many things in the adoption journey and so many things with parenting that you just don't have control over. You cannot completely control your child. You can't control how they're going to react in all these different situations, but you can control your environment. And I think that that is so important to remember as we're dealing with these difficult and quote unquote negative behaviors, that we realize there are areas where we have the power to do something. We have the power to make an impact. And having a clean and safe and not overwhelming space is a great way to start. So decluttering your home is a great place to start. I think a lot of times when people think about decluttering their home, they imagine Marie Kondo style, like pulling everything out, putting it on your bed or putting it out on the counters and sorting through it in this huge weekend or week-long activity. I have done that before, and let me tell you, I find it very overwhelming for me. Plus, if you already have kids in your home who are struggling, this is just not doable. It'll create so much chaos. So I do not necessarily recommend that method. But instead, take a small area of your home at a time. Choose an area that's in a main area of your home that you spend a lot of time in and start decluttering there. Choose one shelf or one drawer. Set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes and see what you can finish, and just do that every day. It doesn't have to be this sprint to the finish line of having a decluttered home. Think of it more like a marathon. You do a little bit at a time, and slowly over time you will get there. Kids who have anxiety or ADHD oftentimes are very distracted when there are a lot of things around, and it actually can contribute to their stress levels. I think sometimes when we think about what kids want, we imagine this room with like bright things all over the walls and tons of toys, and we think that's a kid's dream. I think in the child's mind that may be their dream, but in reality, for kids who have gone through trauma or kids who are not neurotypical, environments like this can actually be extremely overwhelming to them. And so finding ways to just simplify. And guess what? This may sound crazy to you as well, but kids do not need as many toys as we think they do. There have actually been a few studies done that show that kids who have a lot of toys don't play as well. They don't play for as long, they get distracted, they move from thing to thing, and they're more likely to feel like they need an adult to play with them all the time or they need someone else there. Whereas if there's fewer toys, they can focus longer. I found that extremely interesting and actually did an experiment about a year or so into our kids living with us, and let me tell you, it was crazy the difference it made. I was slightly skeptical about this because I'm thinking I want them to be entertained, I want them to have all the toys they possibly can, But the reality was, as soon as I reduced the amount of toys we had, and I didn't even get rid of them, I just put them away and I put fewer toys out, my kids started playing so much better together. I promise you I'm not lying about this. I was absolutely shocked. I actually have a video where I decluttered my house before we moved, and I think in that video I explained, like, we took away a bunch of the toys and our two youngest kids were like getting along, which never happened. They were getting along, playing together, sharing. It was like a world of difference. That doesn't mean we obviously have times where our kids fight or get upset about a toy, but it happens far less since I decluttered a lot of toys. If this sounds like something you want to do, I highly recommend that you watch The Minimal Mom. I've talked about her a lot on here, but I find her content extremely motivating and also very realistic in many ways. She is someone who considers herself a minimalist. I don't quite consider myself a minimalist, but I have been able to learn so much and it has positively impacted my life. So I'll link her channel below because I definitely recommend it. I think I'll link maybe some of her toy decluttering playlists because I found those really helpful as a parent. Aside from decluttering, another way to make your house feel safe to them is by making sure that food is readily available. Many kids who have been adopted or are in foster care have experienced food insecurity at some point in their lives. And even if they haven't experienced that in years, if you are a new person, they've never lived with you before, there is not this trust built up. They don't know for sure that you're going to provide them with food or even that with food that they like. And so it can be typical that kids may overeat. And I think I talked about this in my last video, sometimes even to the point where they get sick. So one way to combat this is to actually make sure you always have some snacks out and readily available. They don't need to be junk food, but find some things that you know the kids like that aren't too bad for them and just keep them out at all times and let them know this is the place they can go for a snack. And you can slowly ease off of that as they get more used to living with you and as you build that trust. At the beginning, we had snacks available to our kids like pretty much all the time. And as time went on, we're like, okay, like dinner is literally in 5 minutes. So you can wait 5 minutes, you can come see what I'm doing, you can help me. Do you want to help serve the plates? Do something that will let them know they are going to get food. Another way you can help them feel safe with food is to actually have a schedule on your refrigerator that says what you're eating each day. This is something I've been doing just to help me make sure that I cook at home and don't go out to eat. And so this can also help your kids. Even 2 years in, my kids still ask me like, what's for dinner tonight? What's for dinner the next day? What's for dinner next week? And so I just have it on the fridge. And to be honest, sometimes they still ask me, but having it on the fridge just is nice to say, look, this is what we have planned. And they can see each night that you do have a plan for food and there's no chance that they're going to end up just going completely hungry. That last step was one of those what I would call preventative steps for dealing with different behaviors. And the next one is as well. The next one is creating schedules and routines so that your kids know what to expect. For kids with trauma or anxiety, it can be extremely overwhelming to not know what is going to happen that day, to not know what's going to happen that week, and things like that. So therefore, having routines and also schedules for them to see what is coming up is extremely helpful. One thing that you can do is create a visual routine or a checklist. This is something I have done for my kids. I'll include a clip of it here. But basically, each of my kids has a checklist, and it may seem like a lot, but I put a little picture next to each thing, and this is exactly what they need to do every morning and every evening. And honestly, I thought that maybe they would think like, oh, this is lame or whatever. They have loved it, and they've actually they don't love the part where they have to ask you to do a chore, but they have loved the structure of it and being able to check it off and knowing exactly what to do. It also, on the parenting side of things, I get way less questions of like, when can I watch TV? When can I do this? What are we doing next? Because they already know their daily routine. And I think there is something extremely comforting about knowing what to expect every day and having each day look pretty similar. In the summer when they were home from school, I used to do a pocket chart visual schedule because we kind of mix things up. We might go to the library one day or to the park one day, and the kids loved that too. They loved waking up in the morning and looking at the pocket chart and seeing exactly what we were doing. I could just tell, I was thinking, am I just being over the top and this is something I would like? And the kids are gonna be like, why are you doing this? But actually, it was super helpful. And they would wake up in the morning and they would look at it so they know exactly what was happening. So this also just helps create that safe, predictable environment, which is so important. Another way to make sure that you have a predictable environment is to make sure that kids know what your expectations are and also what the consequences will be if those expectations are not met. I think it's great to keep your list of rules in your house or expectations, whatever you want to call them, to keep that list pretty simple and to have it posted somewhere. Again, if you can do the visual aspect of it and have the pictures alongside it, that is extremely helpful for older kids and younger kids. I mean, it really helps everybody. And also let them know ahead of time how it will be handled. Something that we always have told our kids is they'll always get one chance at least to try again. So let's say that, we say something to them and they scream back at us. We'll say, hey, let's try that again in a calm voice. And that gives them a chance to kind of reset, trains them to do it again. But then if they choose to not do that again, there may be a consequence, or like what I would consider more of a natural consequence. Like if you're not calm, you need to go to a place where you can calm down. So whether that's a timeout or a time in or something like that. We've also done early bedtimes because if we've noticed a pattern of kids being rude or snappy or things like that, a lot of times it's tied to how much sleep they were getting. And so that has been our number one go-to consequence for what they do, because we always notice that if they get more sleep, it's so much better the next day. So we kind of try to tell them, I don't want you to think of this as much of a punishment as a way to help you. That is something that they don't love, but they've also benefited from. And they know what to expect. They know the types of consequences to expect. And it really just helps all of us move forward without a bunch of drama or surprises or things like that. The next main one is to build trust. And the biggest thing that comes to mind with this is always keeping your promises. If you tell or promise your child that you're going to take them to the park or that you're going to go to the library, do not say that unless you know you can follow through. Kids who have been in foster care or adoption situations have typically been let down by adults in their life in the past. They have probably had many times where promises were not kept, or they were told that something was going to happen and it was kind of ripped out from underneath them. And so that whole feeling of I can't trust adults can be a big reason why we see some of these difficult behaviors pop up. And you know what? It is going to take so much time to prove to them that you will keep your promises. I still have times 2 years into adopting our older kids where they still will not trust that something is going to happen. And I always tell them, do I promise you something if I can't do it? And they say, no. I have to remind them because I have shown them time and time and time again that I'm going to follow through on what I say. And if I can't promise it, I will tell them that. I will say, I'm going to think about that and I'm hoping we can do it, but I can't make a promise, so that they know that when I say I promise them or I tell them we're going to do something, that I follow through. That builds so much trust with your kids. And obviously, spending intentional time with your kids builds trust. Taking them somewhere to do something they enjoy, especially if you have more than one child, if you can take them out one at a time occasionally. Believe me, I know it is hard to find time in the schedule to do this. Even if it's like once a month or once every couple of months, just having that one-on-one intentional time alone with them, doing something you both enjoy, can really build some of that trust and also help build that attachment for both them and for you. And during these times, you want to focus on things like eye contact, physical touch, giving them direct attention. And I'm going to tell you that sometimes as an adoptive or foster parent, this is very hard. If your child is constantly not trusting you or you're dealing with difficult behaviors all the time, sometimes, I'm just being completely honest, I'm saying this so that you don't feel bad if you have this feeling, you will not want to do that. You will be like, no, I just want to be by myself, or I don't want to spend time one-on-one with this kid because they're stressing me out and nothing I do is ever enough. I think that's a feeling a lot of us have with kids in general, but especially with kids who have gone through trauma. But even the little things you can do, don't put pressure on yourself to make it this huge day where you go out together and you do all this stuff. It could be as simple as, hey, I need to run to the grocery store. Do you want to come with me? Or I need to run to pick up dinner. Do you want to come in the car with me and we can talk? Those types of things do make a difference, even if they're not like the biggest deal. And also along the lines of building trust is you want to make sure that your kids know that you are comfortable hearing their feelings, and that you can handle their big emotions. With my oldest daughter, something that has worked extremely well is just being very direct about things. So I very directly tell her that if she feels sad about being adopted or she misses her bio family, that I am comfortable with her talking to me about those emotions. I tell her, I will not feel jealous, I will not be upset. I just want to hear how you're feeling, and you have a right to be able to talk about that with me. I think for a lot of adoptive parents, this can be uncomfortable because we want our children to be happy with us. You know, we want them to feel happy in our family and to be glad that they're here. But the truth is, adoption comes with so many different emotions, positive and negative. And obviously, we're comfortable with the positive emotions, but are we comfortable with the negative emotions? And this will make a huge difference on whether or not this child trusts you with their feelings. If you make it clear to them that you understand that those feelings they're having are normal, that they're totally welcome to have those feelings, that you don't judge them for having those feelings, they're going to feel so much more comfortable talking to you in the future as more and more things pop up in their lives. And you know what? There might be times where it actually is hard to hear them say that. It actually is hard to hear them say, I wish I was with my bio parent, when you know their bio parent was doing drugs or abusive or something like that. But you have to come back to the point that if things had gone as they should have, that child would never have needed to be adopted. And that child is mourning that. They are mourning the fact that they had to go through something that kids shouldn't have to go through. They shouldn't have to be separated from their birth families. They shouldn't have to have situations where a different family has to take them in. So just allowing them to have those feelings builds so much trust. That is something I was super intentional with my oldest daughter, especially from the beginning. And as time goes on, she tells me everything. I swear, she tells me everything that goes on, every emotion that goes through her head, every boy she has a crush on, all of that stuff. And I'm so glad. And she asks me questions of things she doesn't understand. And so I think opening up that communication at the beginning really makes a huge difference with that trust. And then when there's trust, there's less fear. And with less fear, there's less of those challenging behaviors. The next one on my list is to seek interventions. We cannot do this completely on our own. The truth is, and I hate to be Debbie Downer here, but you could do all those things I just mentioned, make predictable schedules, you could build that trust with them and, follow through on what you're going to do and all of those things. And your child may still exhibit all of those difficult behaviors. So if that's where you are, I do not want you to think like, oh, well, something's wrong with me because I tried to do all those things and my kid is still really struggling. That just happens. Our kids have different levels of trauma. What works with my family might not work with your kids. Your kids may have had levels of trauma or extended times of trauma and maybe abuse or neglect that it's not going to be that. For many people, you can do those things I just mentioned, and a lot of those big issues are going to slowly kind of subside over the course of several years. But for others, that's just not the case. And there's nothing wrong with you as a parent if your kid is going through things that are just not resolving. So find interventions to help them. I think so much of being a foster or adoptive parent is being an advocate. You have to advocate for your children. So whether that means making sure they have an IEP at school if they're struggling with school. An IEP, by the way, is an individualized educational program, and it just helps your child. It's basically the equivalent of special ed. So if they need any additional help or support, that is a great thing to look into. If they're dealing with more emotional or behavioral problems, obviously therapy is so important. I would argue that every adopted child should do therapy at some point in their lives, if not over the course of many years, because that's a lot to unpack. So you could either get them in touch with a therapist that, is a family therapist or a trauma attachment type of therapist, but you can also get supports at school. If your child attends a public school, you could reach out to the school counselor or even the school psychologist or the school social worker, depending on what your school has, and see if they have any programs for kids who are dealing with anger. I know that at my child's school previously, they actually had a group for kids who were struggling to control their anger, and one of my children was in that group. And so things like that can actually be supports that are free, that are just, you don't even have to take them to the appointment. It's just there for them at school. Take advantage of that and look into it. I promise you, your school counselor wants to help your kids. So if you just email them, go to the school website, find their email or call them and just say, hey, this is my child's situation. What can we do to support them? Do you have any extra supports? And work with them to find something right. Other interventions you may consider are like social skills classes. A lot of adoptive and foster kids, one of the issues I talked about is having boundary issues, not really understanding who's a friend and who's an acquaintance and all of those things. So definitely look into social skills classes. One of our children attended some and it was helpful. A lot of times these are designed for children with autism, but can actually be attended by kids with other issues with boundaries and social skills as well. And you may need to pursue medication. A lot of times kids adopted from foster care are maybe what some people consider over-medicated when they come to you. So definitely look into the medications they're taking, or if they're not taking any and you think they may benefit from it, talk to their doctor and get that process rolling to see if it's going to be the right fit for them. I will tell you, with one of our children, medication has made a huge difference. And it's very obvious when this child is not on their medication. It is a world of difference, so don't be afraid to look into it. And something on the less intense side of things is just to look into activities that are stress relieving or calming, activities they will enjoy, whether that's a sport or dance or something like that. Give your kid opportunities to try that. Or maybe even if it's something more simple, like go outside with them while they ride their bike. Maybe your child wants to learn how to play the piano, or they want to take voice lessons, or they want to just go on walks with you regularly. Anything that's going to be a stress relieving activity for them can help with these behavior things as well. And there are situations, I don't want to pretend like this doesn't happen. I have friends whose kids are in this situation. There are times when a child's behavior and trauma and all this stuff is so extreme that you do need to look into residential treatment centers. This is nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing that says you're a bad parent. This is a way of helping them get the support that they need. For some kids, this will just be a short stint. This will be a time where they're kind of attending a lot of therapy at a time. They're in a program, they're living there where they're helping them. There's social workers that work there. For other kids, it may be a long-term thing. So if that is something, like if you've already tried all the things I already mentioned and you are still it's just awful, you're having those really extreme or severe behaviors, look into this. And there often can be funding to help with this if your child's adopted from foster care. So please do not be afraid or feel ashamed to look into that if you need it. There's no shame in that. You're helping your kid. You're getting your kid the help they need. And my last one, I think, is probably what we tend to put last on our list in general, but I want this to be something that you actually think of first, and that is to take care of yourself. If I could get in a time machine and go back to Katie when she first adopted, I would tell her, you need to make sure you have time for yourself. You need to make sure that you don't make yourself feel guilty for needing time away from your kids. Do not feel guilty about needing time alone with your spouse. Make it a priority, because you cannot fully serve your kids or be there for them if you are pouring from an empty cup. You just can't. And you may try to because you feel like it's what you should do, but it is not going to be good. You will feel drained, you will feel exhausted, and ultimately you won't be as good of a parent. If at all possible, I really recommend you find at least one time a week where you cannot be with your kids. Now, if childcare is an issue, financially, things like that, find a time when they're asleep, maybe on the weekend if you don't have to work, and make it a time where you just plan to spend some time doing something you enjoy, whether it's watching your favorite show uninterrupted, or reading a book, or taking a bath, that's like the typical self-care thing, or calling a friend, or things like that. Something that you enjoy is great. If you can actually get out of the house, even better. Like go to a coffee shop, relax, whatever you can do. And if you're married, I definitely recommend that you go spend time alone with your spouse. If you can swing it financially, being able to take a little trip, like we're on a little trip right now, more for business purposes, but you can take a little trip just without your kids. It makes a huge difference in just helping you feel refreshed, and it gives you time to miss your kids too. And remember, interventions for yourself can also look like therapy and medication and support groups. All of those things that could be good for your kids, guess what? They also can be good for you. Because caretaker burnout is a thing. Secondhand trauma is a thing. So if you're taking care of someone all the time who has this trauma, this lack of trust, all of those things, you might need this. I have attended therapy for about 2 years now, maybe a little over that. and it has really helped me. I didn't really want to go, I didn't think it was necessary, but now I look back, and again, if I could get in a time machine, I would tell myself the first time we adopted, go to therapy. It's okay. You don't have to have these huge issues. You are struggling with this adjustment. Go to therapy. It will help you. And again, just make sure that you realize you cannot do it all. Just be easy on yourself. You're not going to be able to do everything perfectly. Even the things on this list. I didn't do all of these things all the time, the whole time in our adoption journey. I learned some things the harder way, and that's okay. I don't expect you to be perfect, and please don't expect yourself to be perfect. Just be gentle on yourself and do the best you can. Focus on the things you can control, because there's a lot that you can't control. And so this is a great way that you can actually focus on what you can control instead of what you can't control. I would recommend that you pause this video right now and you make a list. What are the things that I can control and the things I can't control? For example, I can control how my house looks. I can't control how my kid reacts. I can control scheduling out meals. I can't control if my kid complains about what I cook. You know what I mean? Think about the things that you can actually control and focus on those. And just be easy on yourself. I have 2 more tips and then we're done. This is a long one. But my second to last tip is just to ask for help if you need it. Ask for help from friends, family, babysitter, and this kind of goes along with, getting therapy. That's a way of asking for help. Be open with people in your life that you can trust, and just let them know what's going on and let them know that you need support. Do not be afraid to ask for help. We're not meant to do everything on our own. That's why we have each other. And the final one is give it time. If you have a kid that's in your home that is just really struggling, and also you're struggling because of it, just remember that it is not going to be fixed in a day. It is not going to be fixed in a week. And you know what? You can't ever fix your kids. But what you can do is provide the supports you can, do what you can focus on again, but give yourself time. It's not going to happen overnight. Again, this is the whole thing where it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to take a long time to build that trust with your child, to help them to feel safe, and for them to overcome some of the years of trauma or neglect they've experienced. I can honestly tell you that 2 years ago compared to now is so different, I can barely believe it. The amount of growth we have seen in 2 years is crazy. And I'll be honest, I'll be the first to tell you that I oftentimes don't recognize it. I oftentimes still focus on the things that are going wrong or the behaviors that are difficult. But when I really step back and look at the full picture, it's incredible to see what has happened over the last few years. And in my opinion, what God has done in our family over the past few years. And I cannot take credit for all of that. A lot of it is like the situation our kids were in before they came to us, and a lot of it is just God's grace on our lives, If you're someone who's been in this battlefield for a long time, I want you to know that I'm not better than you because my kids are doing okay right now. That is not what this is about. There's so many factors that go into this, and there's nothing wrong with you as a parent, okay? You got this. I'm here for you. I'd love to hear in the comments what you're going through if you want to share. And if you don't know, I actually am also an adoption consultant. So if you are thinking about adopting and you're very confused about where to start, or you have no idea where to start at all, or maybe you need help finding an agency or talking through some of your specific issues revolving around adoption, I'm here to help you, and I would love to work with you. My adoption consultancy is called Adopt Informed, and I always leave a link in a pinned comment below my videos and also in the video description if you would like to work with me. I offer both shorter and longer sessions at different price points to be tailored to your specific needs. And since you made it to the end of the video, I want to do my typical thing that I've been doing recently. So the people who made it to the end, you're my favorites. Don't tell the others. But I like to ask a question at the end to see so that you guys can answer in the comments. I'm assuming most of you are from the United States because I do foster care and adoption in the United States. So if you are, I want you in the comments to tell me the best city that you have ever visited in the US. That's what I would like to hear. If for some reason you're not from the US, why don't you tell us where you're from in the world? That would be really cool. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. You guys are my people who made it all the way to the end. Love you guys. I hope you're having an awesome week, and I will see you next Monday.